Although Mendoza's there. Let me get settled in real quick. Lost my place. All right. All right. Well, good morning again. This morning, we continuing with Pastor Conrad's series, I guess, through Proverbs. We're going to be looking at Proverbs 12. And we're going to be looking at verses 1 through 14. There's also, that's going to be what I read. That's going to be kind of our anchor text with an actual, what I call an anchor verse in it that kind of, I believe, summarizes it all. But then we're going to jump over to Daniel 6, and that's where we're going to spend a lot of the morning, because I believe that story in Daniel 6 kind of gives us a really good illustration of what Solomon was talking about in our proverb, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and read all of 12, not all of it, but 12, 1 through 14. And then I'll talk a little bit about that, but then we'll jump over to Daniel 6. So just be thinking about that, mark your place, mark your phone, however you do it. Proverbs 12, starting in verse 1. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. Good people obtain favor from the Lord, but he condemns those who devise wicked schemes. No one can be established through wickedness, but the righteous cannot be uprooted. A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. The plans of the righteous are just, but the advice of the wicked is deceitful. The words of the wicked lie in wait for blood, but the speech of the upright rescue them. The wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous stands firm. A person is praised according to their prudence, and one with a warped mind is despised. Better to be a nobody and yet have a servant than pretend to be a somebody and have no food. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest act of the wicked are cruel. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. The wicked desire the stronghold of evildoers, but the root of righteousness endures. Evildoers are trapped by their sinful talk, and so the innocent escape trouble. From the fruit of their lips, people are filled with good things, and the work of their hands brings them reward. Verse 7, right there in the middle of all that, says, the wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous stands firm. That's the verse that really was highlighted to me when I first started reading that about a month ago or so, when I knew this was what I was going to preach on. If we look at this world today, it's easy to see like that the wicked are seeming to get by, that seems like they're winning. Their schemes win. They're the ones having the most fun. They have the most stuff, whatever it is. But we know as believers that that's all just temporary. And Proverbs, and Solomon in Proverbs knew that as well. And he stated it in this proverb. A lot of what he's talking about in this proverb is the difference between the two. It's the difference between like the wicked and how they do things, but how the righteous do things. How the wicked go about getting the things that they want to get accomplished, and how the righteous sometimes don't even do anything but just remain where they're at and things work out. Again, when we look at our current situations, many times it does not seem that way. But that's why many times these things are a promise, right? It's not necessarily the reality of what we live in for the day, but it's a promise of what is to come. You'll hear me say this quite a bit, I think, throughout this message or whatever. 12, verse 7, the wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous stands firm. I want us to, if we get one thing today, just realize that that is the promise. That is the promise that we are looking at today as we go through this story in Daniel. So we're going to go over to Daniel 6. If you want to flip over there, we'll be there. I'll reference Proverbs 12 probably a few times, but we're going to stay in Daniel 6. And it's a pretty familiar story of Daniel in the lion's den. Okay? Daniel has been here for quite a while, actually. I look it up, and there's sometimes where you look up photos or paintings or something, and a lot of them actually get it right. I would have thought, until I started doing this, I would have thought of like a young Daniel, but he's probably like almost 80 years old by this point when he goes into the lion's den. So he has been in his current situation. And actually, just his situation has changed just recently as this story takes place. And I'll jump into this. I'm going to do a lot of reading, but I'm also going to do a lot of stopping and talking. But I swear it's not going to be really, really long, okay? I just want to actually read the story and not just summarize it, because I could, but I don't want to miss anything. So I'm going to start in verse 1 of chapter 6 of Daniel. First, I'm going to get a drink of water. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps that by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. I'm going to stop right there. So here's Daniel's story in a nutshell. He was basically taken captive and brought to this place as a young boy, probably a teenager. He was then forced to learn a different language, and the reason why he was taken, and I'll actually just read it. Where's it at? Daniel 1, verse 4. This is what they were looking for when they came and took. They said they were looking for young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. He's basically taken to a foreign place, and he's been made to become this different person. He's obviously, he's got everything going for him, right? He's handsome, he's intelligent, all these things, but yet he's taken to this area, this Babylonian area, and he is forced to just learn all these different things. On top of it, debatable. I thought it was solid truth. It might be a little debatable. I believe it. But it says that he was under the chief eunuch. So if you know what that is, if I'm even saying that right, it's basically like a castrated male, right? And so many believe he was. They believe that he was also, that actually happened to him as well when he was taken. It's not 100% because it's not clear, but they just figure from the fact that he was under that and the fact that at this point at 80 years old, he has no wife, no kids, things like that. It kind of makes sense. But do your research, come to your own conclusion. I tend to believe that. So there's just a lot of things he's dealing with, but throughout all that, he's 80 years old at this point, and look at how he's just thrived through it, right? He he is to the point where in this passage that I read in Daniel, these satraps or whatever, they're like governors. And there's like 120 of them, and he's one of 3 that's over all of them. So, in fact, the king wants to put him over the entire land. Now, it's also important to realize that there's been a switch in power. This isn't the same power that took him back in that verse in chapter 1. They've recently just had a switch in power to this Mede-Persian-like power. And so this is fairly new. And from what I can gather, it's within the first year, and this could even be like weeks into this. He's already made, and you'll see later on, quite the impression on this king, this new king. This isn't the one that's been with him. This isn't the one that's taken him. This isn't all this. They've just had this just overthrow of power. So there's been this new political type of realm or whatever that's come to pass. Continuing in verse 4, it says, "At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could not find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, 'Well, we will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it is something to do with the law of his God.'" So they're trying to figure out. Their jealousy immediately comes in. There's this new government, and they're trying to trap him in something, and they cannot find anything on him at all. Which again, I don't know how far they're looking back, but so far, like it's within a year, maybe even just weeks, maybe a month, that this whole new political thing is taken over. But they can't find anything. I think of, this might be a weird reference, but I think of Mr. Rogers. I loved Mr. Rogers when I was a kid, but you can Google him right now, and other than a few urban legends that people tried to make up that he was like a sniper or something like that, there's not been any dirt pulled up on that man yet. I don't even want to say yet, because I hope not, but it tends to be something always comes up. Now, the man had his flaws, I'm sure, but he has kids and things, and no kids have come out and said, man, he's actually just a horrible person or anything. Everything has stayed true. Another one I think of that might be more relevant to our case would be Billy Graham. I have not seen anything or heard anything on him that has come up after his death. Sometimes it happens. Maybe I missed it. I don't know. But for the most part, they cannot find, and I'm sure there's people looking to discredit people that are trying to do good. This is the same for Daniel's case, but yet they cannot find anything on him. So continuing on, it says, "The administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, 'May the king Darius live forever. The royal administrators, satraps, advisors, and governors here all agree that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or humans being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law, so that the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be replaced.' So King Darius put the decree in writing." Okay, that's a lot to read. But here's the point of that. They're going what? They're going to this leader. They're going after his ego. They're going after his pride. They say, "Hey, live forever, your majesty." And here's this thing. They can't find any way to trap Daniel. So they're going to find a way through this like legal kind of loophole or whatever that they can get this king to do if they can manipulate him right. It's kind of weird if anybody came up to me and said, "Hey, make a," even if I wasn't a Christian or whatever, like, "Hey, make it so that nobody can worship anybody but you. They can't pray to anybody but you for 30 days. You should do that." And be like, "Yeah, it's a good idea." To this king, it was a good idea. And so he did it. And that's important. That little line in there that he put the decree in writing is important. It says, now when David learned the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish the decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown in the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Okay, he put this in writing, so they got him. At this point, he doesn't know what they're talking about, but they got the king. They got what they want. He put it in writing, and I'll explain that here in a second because you might have the same questions that I have. Now, the thing I want to say before that is look at what Daniel does. Daniel finds out about it, but he just goes back to doing what he always had done before. It actually says in verse 10 that at the very end, it says, just as he had done before. He prays 3 times a day to God towards Jerusalem, just like he does before. He just goes right back in to whatever his normal routine is, doesn't even give it any thought from what it sounds like. So the king says it cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. Notice how they keep saying you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel, made every effort to do so until sundown to save him. He made every effort. This king, who barely knows this guy, really, maybe for a year, maybe 30 days, I don't know. It's not 100% out there. But he does not know this. Daniel has made such an impression on this king that this king is going all the way until sundown, trying to find some sort of loophole in his own law to get Daniel off the hook and to where he doesn't have to go into the lion's den. Daniel's righteousness, Daniel's character, all these things that he had been doing for all of these years is paying off for him right now. His overwhelming, the king will say it here in a minute, the God you continually serve, continuing to serve this God is paying off for him. But look at what happens. Then the men went as a group to the King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, this according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict, I think that's what it says, that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave orders, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, here it is, may your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you. Now, if you're like me, you might be like Oakland. My daughter says, what the heck? I don't know why she says that, but I don't know where she learned it, but she'll randomly just go, what the heck? But why can't the king, if you're thinking of me like a king seems most powerful. You think king, you think dictatorship, you think whatever the king says goes, right? Why can't the king say, well, no, I just changed my mind. He doesn't count. I want to rescue him. Why does he have to go through all these loopholes? Why does he have to work all the way until sundown just to try to rescue Daniel? Well, it's because there's a lot that goes into that, the fact that it was written, that it was the decree, and it was that he put it into place. That's why they manipulated him. So there's a few reasons. One, if he went back on it now, he could. Let me make that clear. He could, but here's what would probably happen to him. First of all, it would show weakness. We already know that he's pretty prideful. The fact that he even made this based on the fact that they got to worship him. So it would show that he's weak, which would then in turn show that would give them and the people probably reason to maybe revolt against him, would maybe cause an uprising of some sort, might cause like a civil war even, right? So he's trying to find a loophole to get Daniel out, but the reason why he doesn't just pull him out with his ultimate power is because really it's still pretty selfish. He's thinking of his kingdom over the person, but it's also like once he sets those things in like that, I guess nothing is undoable when it's a human thing. But in their culture, in their eyes, this is something that cannot be replaced. He has to hold to it for at least these 30 days. So he's been manipulated, he's been tricked. Daniel, unfortunately, because of that, now has to go to the lion's den. Let's see, where do we leave off? So he put a stone and he placed it over the mouth. This is the king. And the king, I'm sure he didn't do it himself, probably hired somebody. And the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the ring of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. So everybody knew this was the king. This is what's going to happen. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. Just a little side funny. I think it's funny, without any entertainment. We all have to be entertained, even back then. We all have to watch Netflix or something like that. This king, but that night he was so distressed, he was like, I don't even want anything. I don't want any food. At the first light of dawn, the first opportunity he had, and I like to remember that sometimes, that different time, darkness meant a lot back then. You had to wait for the sun or a torch or something to really do anything. It wasn't like now where we can work 24 hours a day and do all those things if we want. The very first opportunity he has, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lion's den? Daniel answered, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lion. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong to you before you, your majesty. Again, verse 7, the wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous stand firm. David's situation, he was saved because of his continually serving God and standing in his righteousness. The wicked had a plan. It didn't work. The king was overjoyed, gave orders for Daniel to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded that the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed their bones. Back in Proverbs 12, verse 13, it says, evildoers are trapped by their sinful talk, and so the innocent escape trouble. Solomon's talking about, like I said, the righteousness of somebody. You know, we're only righteous as far as we can in our own sight, but our continually serving God, or our righteousness through Christ, back then talking through God, this foreshadowing of Christ, but through that, there are the things that will keep us from the wicked sins. But eventually, like I said, the wicked who are winning, this plan has worked so far, it comes to an end. Daniel is rescued, and they, the ones that were the evildoers, the ones that were making the plan, are the ones that end up, unfortunately, unfairly maybe, with their wives and their children into the lion's den. And notice what it says, before they even hit the ground of the den, they were overpowered and their bones were crushed by the lions. Now that could be a lot of reasons. They were probably hungry, too. I mean, they were probably, I'm sure they don't feed them before they're going to throw somebody in the lion's den, and they didn't eat Daniel, but still, that's how quickly it turned around on them and the trap that they were set. So, as I close this up, that story of Daniel, you're looking at a guy who had every reason to feel like, throughout his whole life, to feel like everything's against me, nothing's going to work out. Whatever calling, whatever plan I had, it's been nothing but wicked, nothing but evil, nothing but, this has been taken, this is, I've been put here, I've been forced to do this. Yet all he did was thrive in it. All he did was thrive. Now we can make that a real powerful story about Daniel. He's our example in here. Daniel's just this strong person, that he's just this mighty guy or whatever like that. And I'm sure there's a lot to him that is very impressive, seems to be. But what I don't want us to miss here is the fact that he followed God. Everything that he had was because of God. Everything that he accomplished, even the ability to withstand that and thrive in an environment that would not usually let you do that, was because he continually served God throughout his entire life. When he came to the end, to that point, and there's been other times, that's not the first, but in that point, it proved to be when he stood firm for what he believed in. Let's just put it that way. When he didn't falter, when he didn't worship the king as people did, God walked him all the way through it. God sent an angel for him to close the lion's mouth. And eventually, it's not like revenge, but eventually God took care of the people that tried to harm him. Again, the anchor verse for me, the wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous stand firm. To finish this chapter out, I wouldn't be doing it any justice if I didn't point out the fact that because of all this, this is what the king said. Then King Darius wrote, again, now he's still writing. Remember before, all of those decrees were written. They had to be done. That's the power he had, whatever, the power of his written word, this king wrote to all the nations and people of every language in all the earth. May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth, and he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus and the Persians. The ultimate result of all this was an entire kingdom, or a king who had the most power, is now putting a decree that everybody is not going to worship him, but they're going to worship the true God, the living God, the one that rescued Daniel. And he even, I think it's funny that he states all these things, but he also states in the very end, who has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. He even referenced it to his one thing that he could say, we kind of talked about in Sunday school. What's that moment? What's that thing that you see that helps build your faith? What's your moment that you can say, yes, God is real? For him, it was the lions. He learns and believes now that all these other things are true, but he referenced right back to the lions and to how they rescued Daniel. So as we go into this week, as we leave here, it's easy, I guess, to look around and see, again, seems like the world is winning. Seems like a pretty cliche thing to say because we all kind of see it. But let's just be honest with ourselves. Did I shut this off? Okay. Let's just be honest with ourselves. We don't always fully believe that God is going to win. I mean, maybe you do. I hope you do. But if you're like anybody, any human, you're going to waver in that just a bit. Doesn't mean you're not saved. Doesn't mean you're lacking faith or you're less than anybody else. But it's easy to get down about it. It's easy to not believe that these things are actually going to turn around, or that there's actually an ultimate end to all of this, to all of the things that we see. But we have stories like this, and there's plenty more. There's plenty more in this Bible. There's plenty of examples of things where God is taking wicked things and he's actually allowing it to go all the way through. But then there's a redemption at the end for that person in the story, maybe a group of people in that story, but then ultimately it relates to us as believers in this world. Let's pray. God, I just thank you for your word. I thank you that your word teaches better than I could ever teach, and hopefully I didn't add too much to it or take anything away from it, Lord. Hopefully I was able to maybe just put my perspective on it, if anything, and hopefully anybody out there could do the same. They can hear this story, have something to ponder, something that's now enlightened them just a little bit more into what you're trying to do, how you interact with us in this world, how you interact with a fallen world. Not a perfect world, it's a fallen world that you're making perfect. You've redeemed us. That's the odd thing. We're redeemed. You've already done it. Christ has already done it. But we're still living in this fallen world that you're working us through. And God, I'm just so appreciative that there's scripture, there's stories, there's Proverbs with wisdom to remind us, with promises, and then I can take those promises. Anybody in this room can take those promises and find something to apply it to, and then possibly take that story and apply it to something going on in our lives today. God, just thank you for this day. Just thank you for this opportunity, as always, to gather as your people. I appreciate all that you've done and that you're doing. It's in your name I pray. Amen.